In order for me to write poetry that isn't political, I must listen to the birds, and in order to hear the birds, the warplanes must be silent. Marwan Makul. The Daily Grind, Chapter 198. For the last 6 years, Connie had been a practicing talk therapist. She was aware, in an abstract way, that there were a lot of people who used that term for themselves but skipped many of the important steps. Steps like actually getting an education, for example, or maintaining that education. Connie complained about that a lot when she talked to others in her field, and had accidentally offended more than one person through those complaints, but she didn't really care that much. Well on her way to her 50s, Connie had less time to suffer fools than she used to in her life. Recently, she had found employment with a group called the Order of Endless Rooms. The pressures of being a therapist during the time of COVID were, to put it mildly, intense. With more personal time for introspection, everyone being online and exposed to more information, and a few other less pleasant factors, there was a massive disparity between the number of therapists available and the number of people who suddenly realized they probably actually needed to talk to a therapist. And as Connie was aware, being a healer in any context did not make you immune to harm. So she had taken a side job to fill a couple of months of personal leave that she was taking that wasn't really leave at all. And then she had kept that side job, turned it into her main role, still seeing old clients but not taking new ones, slowly transitioning to being a dedicated support member for the Order. The existence of non-human life had been a bit of a shock, to put it mildly. She was still trying to sort out how to approach dealing with the Camercondas. It was one thing to be responsible for your own education on new information and techniques. It was quite another to write the book yourself. At first she had thought someone was playing a joke on her, but if they were, it was sustained to a level that no casual prank had ever been before. And while the Camercondas didn't map perfectly to human psychology, they were almost all deeply traumatized by what they had to live through, and human therapy techniques were at least a start to begin helping them. So she had settled into a nice routine here, seeing a wide range of Order members for everything from casual sessions to talk about a single concern to long-term cognitive behavioral therapy, and also working with her counterparts to actually write the book on therapy in a world of different species and literal magic. The literal magic was also a shock, but human neuroplasticity was an impressive thing, and Connie got used to it fast enough. She was still waiting for approval to try using skulljacks for trauma assistance, but it was frustratingly understandable why it might be a good idea to move slowly on that front. Which brought Connie up to today, adapting to the Order's way of doing things, even if she did still get regularly shocked by whatever new crisis came up or some bizarre magic effect settling over the building and telling her how many fish were within 100 meters of her person. Today, she was being shocked yet again. It had been normal so far, but as she came back from a pleasant lunch upstairs, nodding politely to the knight that she was pretty sure was named Dave waiting in the hall as she re-entered her private room that she used for her sessions, she found someone sitting on her couch. Well, not sitting, really. Curled up on. A tense knot of a body pressed into the corner where the arm of the couch met the cushion like they could somehow burrow into it, staring at the door and at her with a hyper-alertness that was impossible to miss. This had happened before. Her main complaint was that some people just didn't schedule their drop-ins, though for many new arrivals to the Order, the idea of scheduling wasn't something that they had had 40 years to get used to, so she let it go. What hadn't happened before was her seeing anything like the person on her couch. Connie assumed it was a person. She couldn't imagine anything that wasn't sitting like that being anything other than a person. There was a tension to them that she found consistent across her patients that had physical bodies. This one had black fur mixed with some kind of beetle shell, but it was still looking at her with mismatched eyes that were obviously intelligent, even if there were more of those eyes than she was used to. The extra arm wrapped around curled legs that bent too far inward for a human just made them look even less comfortable with themselves. A trio of three-fingered hands tightly gripped their own thin limbs through the long skirt they were wearing. Under the hood of a sweatshirt that they were also wearing despite the summer heat outside, Connie could see a triangular outline of a head and a stunted muzzle that poked out with misaligned fangs jutting from the sides. Hello, she spoke softly, setting down her stack of documents with an enforced casual motion. Is there something you need help with? For a long moment, Connie wondered if the rat creature could actually answer, but given how her life had been around here and the fact that it was wearing clothing, that prompted her to treat this more like a new client than a sudden alarm. So she went with her standby. Be patient, wait for them to answer. Everyone needs time now and then. It took a few minutes of her leaning slightly on her desk before the other person opened their mouth and tried to say something, which took them a couple false starts, and Connie got a slightly unnerving look at exactly how many fangs they had, along with the softly glowing blue of their saliva while they worked out how to start speaking. Said I could talk to you, Kika said, in a voice that was both wet and strained at the same time. Connie nodded. Good, they were both a person and in the right place. That solved two problems at once. She shifted her office chair from behind her desk to the middle of the open floor, the ritual of deliberate setup and placing herself in a completely exposed location a familiar one to her. Then she found a new notepad and sat, smoothing her shirt briefly before she looked up at the person who was talking to her. Yes, she said with a soft smile. That is what I am here for. I'm Connie. It's nice to meet you. Kika, her patient said, and then after a pause nervously added to clarify, I'm Kika. He spoke like he wasn't used to using full sentences. The name sounded almost sharp coming from his muzzle, like an alert sound, not a word, but Connie rolled with it. Hello, Kika, she said, butchering the tone entirely. What would you like to talk about today? Oh, she had many other questions, but personal curiosity was for the dining room and the discussion server. Now was the time for professional targeted compassion. Again there was a long pause before any answer, but when he spoke again it was with an almost strangled utterance of, I don't know. Which was, Connie knew, a lie. No one could hold that much tension in themselves without having something they wanted to talk about, but she didn't say that. She just waited. I don't know. I don't know what I should say. He looked up at her, hood sliding back to reveal more black fur and chitin, and an asymmetrical cluster of what seemed like antennae in place of ears. What do I say? He asked, searching for an answer. Connie folded her hands in her lap, ignoring the notepad for now. There isn't a right answer to that, she told him. This isn't a test, it's just a conversation. You can say anything, but if it would help you to have a starting point... She watched as he gave a jerking nod of his roughly angular head. Well, something brought you here today. What's bothering you, right now? She watched him struggle to speak before adding, It is okay to take your time. There is no hurry. I do not know your species, but it is usually helpful to pause. She waited for him to listen, and then, and take a deep breath. She inhaled along with the patient. And untense, she finished with an exhale, opening her own hands in front of herself to give an example to follow. Kika repeated the breathing exercise one more time, tension fading, but only slightly, to be replaced by a light twitching shiver of hands and folded legs. There are more of us now, he said. What do you mean by us? Connie prompted. No leading questions from her. Ask directly. That was important. Ambiguity was fertile ground for anxiety, and her job was to remove that, not grow more. Me and my other, Kika stammered out. Like me. He looked down at his own body. Connie didn't press that, but she did leave an open invitation. It's important you know, for all of our sessions, that you don't need to share anything you're not comfortable with, but if you do, know that you're safe here. Nothing you say to me ever leaves this room, all right? Oh, all right. Kika flinched. Me and my partner. He stared up at Connie as if daring her to argue, clawed fingers digging into his fur in a reflexive tightening. She just nodded. Thank you for sharing, she told him simply. So there are more of you, and this has made you uncomfortable? He nodded again, a sharp bob of his head that splattered a tiny drop of glowing blue saliva onto his sweatshirt, where it began to hiss and smoke briefly before fading out to a small scorch mark. There were many such marks on the hoodie. Worried. He stopped and took a shaking breath, shaking his head as well and repeating himself more clearly. I am worried. I am worried about them. They'll hurt us. Connie stopped the note she was making and looked up to meet Kika's eyes. When you say hurt, what do you mean? Claw or bite, break our shells, kill us. Kika said it like it meant nothing, and the seemingly casual attitude toward violence shot ice through Connie's blood. Many members of the Order were familiar with combat, but this was different. This was a blunt acceptance of something that was intimately painful. I'm not sure you need to talk to me about this, she admitted. If there's a threat to you like that, I know several people who can help you with safety, but my role is to help you through your own emotions, not physical violence. James says they are like us, Kika said. He says they were just afraid. They won't hurt us, but he doesn't know. He pulled himself tighter into a ball again, the small relaxation he'd experienced vanishing quickly. Connie made a note that James was involved in this and to ask permission to speak to him later. What doesn't he know? She asked patiently, but Kika didn't respond. Not just not responding right away, but not responding at all. He went silent and gave a small shake of his head. Connie pressed on. That's all right. We can talk about something else. Would you like to tell me about your partner? His eyes brightened for a brief flash before the person on her couch receded again and gave her a suspicious look. You don't know him? She gave a friendly shake of her own head, smiling. I didn't even know people such as you existed until this conversation. There's quite a lot going on around here, isn't there? Yes. The word came out almost as a squeak. Connie made a note to try to determine if that meant amusement or something else. It is very busy. Things keep changing. He paused. We keep changing. Good changes? Connie asked. I can speak, Kika said, and it doesn't hurt. People help us. It's dry. Those sound like good changes, she said, listing them out on the paper with bullet points, and listing the reasons they would be changes in her mind as things to only touch lightly. But how do you feel about them? Kika pulled his knees further up, planting his chin on them and looking at her with consideration. Strange, he settled on. It is good, but why do I feel like I should feel bad for feeling good? Do you know? His eyes were focused on her, wide, hoping for an answer. Connie quirked the corner of her mouth up at the familiar situation. Before I answer, I have a technical question, and if this is personal, you can tell me you don't want to answer. But are you human? No, Kika said instantly. She nodded. Well, then I can't tell you with any certainty. But for humans, our minds want us to be useful. Useful to ourselves, useful to our community, useful to our partners. Along with the last line, she motioned at Kika with her pen. When we are doing that, it feels good. When what we're doing is part of a group and everyone is helping everyone, it feels better. But if we don't feel like we're useful, then anyone helping us can make our minds turn on themselves. We would call this shame or embarrassment. We feel like we're failing because we need to rely on others. Does that sound familiar? Kika nodded. Like I'm not good enough, he said with a wet hiss. Harash helps. What do I do? He doesn't need me. The sentence structure and speaking pattern started to break down into clipped fragments as he continued. Is Harash your partner? No. Yes, partner, Kika said, breaking eye contact to stare at the wall. Connie nodded. It sounds very much like you behave like a human, she said in a comforting tone. Kika whipped his head back around, a few blue droplets splashing on the couch and carpet. What? He demanded, with a confused and harsh voice. Oh yes, Connie told him. Many of us are conditioned to not show vulnerability, to push away that shame by not acknowledging it, because it is hard to trust people, isn't it? Especially if you've been hurt before. Keegan nodded again, slowly and suspiciously, like he knew that she was walking him into a trap. But also, in a lot of ways, all of us already know, deep down, how silly that is. Let me ask you a question. What if you were the one helping and A rush was in your position. What would you do? I don't understand, Kika said. Would you hate him? Connie prompted. Would you be mad at him? No! The word was sharp and loud, almost approaching a battle cry, complete with Kika starting to uncurl one of his arms, claws extended before he caught himself. No, he repeated, quieter but just as insistent. Connie didn't react to the motion, except to make a note to get Planner to schedule her an appointment with the partner as well, if possible and if he was willing. Most of us are like that, she told Kika quietly as he tried to push himself even deeper into the couch, claws scratching and pulling at the seams of his skirt. You know you would never hurt anyone who was vulnerable with you, especially not someone you cared for, but we can have trouble seeing that others would ever do the same. Does this make me bad? Kika asked her in a tiny voice, a sizzling liquid pooling in the corners of his eyes. I keep making mistakes. Of course not, Connie said, firmly. It makes you a perfectly normal person, she told him, moving slowly to offer him a box of tissues that he took with 2 clawed hands, leaving his third arm still holding his knees in place. He didn't do anything with the tissues, just sank his claws into the soft cardboard, but at least that seemed to help, which was good enough. Would you like to tell me what you were worried about? She asked. It took a minute, and Kika wiping burning tears away on the scorched trail of the arm of his sweatshirt, but he did eventually answer. I think I'm scared, he said with a near-silent hiss. Of everyone. Connie nodded slowly. Would you like to know something interesting? He looked up from the box he was slowly dismantling, eyes snapping to hers. That's perfectly valid, she told him. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to not know. And if you'd like, you can come back and we can talk about it more and try to understand. Does that sound good? Kika wiped away another set of tears from his left eyes. Yes, he whispered. I'd like that. Now, if you need to talk more today, I can reschedule the next person, but if you think that you'll be okay for a few days, Planner can make time for you in my rotation. Which would you prefer? I don't want to be in the way, Kika said slowly. That's not what I asked you. Connie's voice was firm. Just because you need help does not mean you are in anyone's way, especially not here. Kika flinched, but then took a deep breath and steadied himself, looking up at her. No, he settled on. I'll come back. All right, I'll have Planner contact you soon, okay? Connie stood and moved her chair back. And I can't make you do anything, but I think you know it would be a good idea to share with your partner what's worrying you. I think you know he'll understand, don't you? Kika nodded and watched as Connie opened the door, cocking his head at the motion she made before he realized he was being invited to step out. He jolted to his feet, and Connie raised her eyebrows as his form seemed to unfold like a puzzle box. Strangely jointed limbs, legs that made odd angles under the long skirt, and a torso that was a little too thin and tight, plus a neck that was a little too long, made for an uncanny-looking body that was far more obvious when standing up. He seemed to notice her interest and mistook it as discomfort, tugging his hood closer over his eyes. Sorry, he muttered. Oh, there's nothing to apologize for, she told him, leading him out to the small waiting room and noticing that there was someone different sitting on her couch there as well. Oh, good afternoon. It's Dave, yes? Did we have an appointment? Oh, no, sorry, Dave said, shoving his phone in his pocket and waving awkwardly. I'm here for moral support. How'd it go? He asked Kika. Good, the rat roach answered before slipping past and out the door in a rapid rush of limbs. Dave gave a laugh and stood up. Thanks for seeing him on short notice, he told Connie. I guess he hasn't been doing okay and wouldn't really talk to anybody. Well, some warning would be nice next time, she told him. If I could ask, what is he? Oh, I thought I left a note, Dave said. Oops. Also, they're rat roaches. That is a terrible name, Connie informed him. Come up with something better. Also, don't just leave him without you if you're his support. Right, Dave exclaimed, jolting to his feet. Sorry, ma'am. He followed out the door, looking both directions to try to figure out where Kika had gone, before giving a stuttered, starting one way, vanishing down the basement hall, and then rushing back across her line of sight in the other direction. Connie sighed, went over, and closed her door before turning to the incredibly patient and quiet Cameronda on the other waiting room couch. Good afternoon. Smell of grass? How has your week been? She asked as she led them back into the other room. Pleasant. I have decided summer is the superior season, they said in their digital voice. Connie smiled and shut the door behind herself. Never a dull day around here. One of the major perks, James had decided, of getting into the kind of physical shape that was sort of required to not die if you went deeper into any given dungeon was that he could be more physical with his partners. Which was to say, he could drape himself over the naked back of one Anesh's who was lying on their bed, while his upper body curled into another, sitting on that same bed but propped against the wall, and he could easily keep himself pushed up in just the right way so as not to crush anyone. And it was barely tiring at all. It was a little tiring, though, but it was also comfortable, and it had that kind of electric excitement that came from being close and intimate with a person that you loved, even if you weren't actually having sex. And they weren't currently having sex, because at the moment, both Anesh, unsynced from each other, were trying to apply their slightly different perspectives to making a very specific blue orb item work properly, and James was busy being a distraction. So the problem made itself, you see, he was rambling. The existence of cars and cheap gas basically solves, in massive air quotes, the problem of the sprawl. And because our architectural technology has sort of advanced a ton after the advent of the automobile, we've mostly been designing for a world where people can drive. Interesting, both Anesh said, staring at the blue orb they had sitting on the bed in front of them, along with a few other things that didn't really belong on a bed, at least according to the very narrow mental list of things that James had that he believed belonged on beds. In the background noise of their shared apartment, the hiss of pouring water cut off with a small squeak, and shortly afterward a damp Alana stepped out of the bathroom attached to their shared bedroom. You know, now that I'm getting used to the giant magical bath, she mused, running a towel over her limbs. Right, James said. Best cultural decision anyone ever made, honestly. Showers don't compare. It's a close race, but you're right. Alana flopped on the bed, wet hair lashing on the comforter at the end. So, what are you cuties up to? James is distracting us, both Anesh said simultaneously. James cut off as Anesh got there before him. Alright, yeah, I'm distracting Anesh, but I'm also talking about city design. Alana nodded, pulling herself forward to weasel into the pile of limbs her partners had become. And what's Anesh doing that you're distracting? Trying, and failing, Anesh said, to remake a telepad, and it is annoying. Right. Alana twisted away from looking up at Anesh's face to focus on James. He's not supposed to be working right now, so tell me about cities, she said with a somewhat suggestive grin. James laughed shortly before rolling in Anesh's lap to face her and getting shoved off onto the blankets as Anesh lunged to save the blue orb he was working with from being crushed. Okay, so cities are big, right? James started, undeterred by Anesh's actions. So I've heard, Alana answered. Wait, is this going to be another just use the orange orbs to solve everything thing, because you know we can't make that work on a civic scale without a lot more orbs. Like, a lot. No, James rolled his eyes. And I only thought that for a month before someone corrected me. No, this is about normal-ass human follies. We keep building out. He punctuated the word by throwing his hands over his head to thump into the pillow. Anesh, again, narrowly pulling the orb he was working with out of the way of James's attack. Alana nodded as she settled in and got comfortable on the bed with them. Out, like, as opposed to what, though? Down? You want to build Tokyo 3? Actually, that's... Okay, no, for a few reasons, but also sort of, but vertically is what I'm talking about. Like, okay, think of the strip mall near us. Picture it in your mind's eye. Please stay out of my mind's eye, Anesh muttered. We are working. Sure, I've got it. What about it? Alana asked. Alright, so you got a couple big box stores, a grocery store, a handful of restaurants, and then a bunch of other random little places, and exactly 0 two-story buildings. And then 1 billion square acres of parking lot. Okay, yeah, I hadn't really thought about that before. I get where this is going, I think. Also, it's just acres. Acres are square footage, I think. You don't need to say square acres. Alana twisted her body to reach for her phone, sitting on a nightstand. Anything sexy about the motion of her nude form eliminated when she kneed James in the ribs while doing it. Yeah, she said as he gasped for breath before tossing her phone back onto a pillow. It's just acres. Okay, James wheezed. Well, thing is, literally every part of the property could be better used with just 1 extra floor, right? And I understand it's expensive to build stuff, but we're not talking about cost to the developer here. We're talking about, like, social structuring. It would be possible, even in our capitalist hellhole, to create incentives to build up. You put the smaller retail stores and offices for things like insurance or banking on the 2nd story, and then the food on the ground floor. Major outlets that do high-volume retail stay on the ground floor for shipping reasons, which is its own thing that could be fussed with, but that's not for now. Okay, question. Alana poked him, cutting off his explanation with a motion that went from a prod to a light caress and then a less light tickle of his stomach. Accessibility. Is that a question yet, or am I waiting? How do accessibility? Alana clarified. See, it's a question because I use that sound at the end where it goes up in pitch. James tried to grab and gnaw on her hand, getting a laugh from his partner before she escaped, and he refocused. I mean, it's more expensive, but you just use some of the upstairs space as communal walkways. Maybe even external space. Build it like a pyramid. I don't know. That's probably bad for some reason. And then you have central elevators or escalators. Stairs, too, obviously, but there needs to be, like, ADA stuff. That really does sound like it would be more expensive, buddy. I mean, I don't know what the upkeep on an elevator is like, James admitted, because that's Karen's domain, and I'm going to message her in a second to ask. But how many would you really need, compared to how many more businesses you could put in a central space? It must be in favor of elevators, right? It'd screw up parking, Alana pointed out. Parking already sucks there during the day. Yeah, so, like, parking already sucks, and they're using the majority of the physical terrain for it. Which makes me think parking might be a terrible idea, but allow me to introduce you to a novel new architectural innovation that I call the parking structure. James clapped his hands together and arced them away from each other like he was forming a rainbow over his head. Designed in 2019 by John M. Parking Structure, the parking structure is a structure that is built to facilitate parking. It accomplishes this by being a parking lot, but tall. In this essay, I will... Alana rolled herself forward and lunged, tackling James into the mattress with a yelp. One Anesh became a casualty of the sudden assault, while the version of himself that was sitting against the wall holding an orb and a notepad in each hand simply allowed his boyfriend, and his duplicate, to be swept away, trying his hardest to ignore the noises that were either screams or giggles depending on how you interpreted it. Light rail! James gasped out, reaching for an Anesh who simply cocked an eyebrow and left him to his fate as Alana tried to blow raspberries on his neck. Light rail! You can't get out of this by yelling civics devices this time, Lyle, his girlfriend challenged him, pulling him back down, while the other Anesh dragged himself away and crawled around the bed to the floor to prop himself back up next to his duplicate. These are inconvenient working conditions, one Anesh said to the other. For a rather inconvenient problem, too. James rolled over Anesh's legs, trying to grab onto his boyfriend as Alana continued her assault. All blue orbs are inconvenient and also help me, he gasped out in the voice of frantic laughter before Alana pulled him off to the side again. As his partners continued to play fight, Anesh couldn't keep a smile off his faces. He actually was trying to make this work, and they were a massive distraction, especially when they were doing that naked, but they were still adorable, even if they were introducing inconveniences to his work. Anesh paused, and then shared a glance with himself as their mostly parallel thoughts intersected. No, it couldn't be that easy, right? He muttered in two voices. In his hands, he readjusted his grip on the small 50-page pocket notebook, the size 2 blue orb, and the yellow that he had planned on powering the whole thing with. Then he took a deep breath and imagined. But this time, instead of trying to push away the distractions and annoyances, he let them all in. Alana and James making noise and jostling him, the Illipede hovering within worrying range of his head on the desk nearby, the slightly uncomfortable warmth of the apartment in summer when the AC wasn't quite good enough even with the green orb that had powered it up. He just let it all color his thoughts. The telepads were annoying, weren't they? They were capricious, finicky. Sometimes they sent your girlfriend to Florida for a few months. They required annoying precisions and had stupid caveats that wouldn't let you go to the moon. Suddenly, Anesh realized why James thought the blue items were alive in a way, and more, why he thought they were sarcastic in a bigger way. And all his memories of running D&D games for his friends surged to the forefront of his mind. The telepads were like a GM telling the players to stop dicking around. The orbs in his hands vanished, swirling into the notepad in a haze of small, glittering motes of dust, and just like that, Anesh had a telepad. Well, not exactly. The telepads had a few pages left of their awkwardly sized paper. What Anesh had was a compact 50-page, ready-to-go, complete notebook. He was absolutely sure it was going to have some new and silly issue as well. But he yelled in triumph anyway. Finally, he cried, loud enough that it startled James and Lana out of whatever they were currently doing. My magnum opus is complete. Like from Bloom County? James asked, the electric energy of laughter still flowing through his voice. Like from I made a telepad, Anesh announced. Or something telepad-esque. He briefly paused as he said the word, realizing just how much James had rubbed off on him since they had become friends and then more than friends. You two are very sexy like that, one of him said, and both of him flushed as his brain caught up with what he had just said on a spontaneous whim, standing over the bed and looking down at his partners. James and Lana just made doe eyes at him before attempting to drag both present Anesh into their tangle of blankets and limbs for a very different kind of affection than they had been showing each other. Roughly an hour later, after they'd all showered again, James found himself in their kitchen, throwing together some simple tuna melts for their dinner before he asked his partners if they wanted to go on a walk with him and enjoy the fact that it was 11 p.m. and still 80 degrees outside. When Anesh walked in, flipping through the blank pages of his new, probably telepad, James gave him a goofy grin before speaking. Hey, can you grab me an onion? I'm making some food. Of course. What kind? Anesh asked, quickly slipping the telepad into his pocket. Red, James said. Anesh nodded, and then looked around the apartment's living room, before looking over at the kitchen. Where are the onions? He asked, suddenly realizing that James was the one by the stove and he was the one standing amid couches and tables. Basement, James said with a toothy grin. The pantry is the door on the left. Anesh tapped his knuckles against his forehead for a second before he sighed. Right, he said slowly. Of course it is. He turned the door in their second-floor apartment's hallway, popping it open and taking the thin set of stairs down into a space that was, somehow, not the apartment directly beneath them. When Alana came out and asked where Anesh was, and James repeated the word basement in exactly the same smug tone, she gave another sigh, but one that was a lot more wistful. Fuck, man, life is getting really fun, isn't it? She asked James. Oh, that reminds me, James said. Speaking of fun things, we have a choice to make tomorrow. Of whether we go into Officium Monday? Anesh asked. At least one of us is. He and his duplicate jutted their thumbs at each other. Because, you know, the whole thing about flooding the market for platinum. Also something about cancer. James shook his head. No, though the platinum thing is going to start being a problem soon, according to people who are better at the commodities market than I am, though that wasn't what I was talking about. He pulled his tray out of the oven and started sliding sandwich halves onto plates to be assembled to the whims of his partners. I'm talking about the new place that we got a call about a couple weeks ago. The library! Alana lit up like a beacon. I'm in. Also, it's real? Scout Group confirmed it. James nodded. Charlie left a message on the server. We've got a whole new section for library things, and a channel just for people coming up with bad names. Have I met Charlie? Alana asked. Anesh gave a shrug and answered while James tried to deal with the oversized bite of food that he had just taken. Probably have. He's been around for a long time as part of the support group for office survivors. Didn't really engage with the rest of us much, but from what Sarah's told me, he kind of adopted one of the new camera condas. They don't do response stuff, or a lot of delve activities, but they're getting more involved, and they volunteered to check out the library. He paused. Also, I think Charlie is one of the people who made a good mem file, but I'll have to check. What for? Alana asked. Like, not why did he do that, but what skill did he make a file for? Kayaking, James said. Fuck, I want to go kayaking now, Alana muttered. Hey, can we go kayaking? Yes? James asked. I mean, yes, sure. Like, we basically can do whatever we want, whenever we want. We are self-actualized and free. You want to go fucking camping? Let's fucking go camping. Anesh, get me a tent. Anesh eyed James over the plates he had just been passed. James, where's the tent? He asked, already knowing the answer in both his hearts. Basement, James told him. Anesh nodded. No, he said, while one of him ate. Also, I would like to check out the library with you two tomorrow, so no camping for now. Alana, we'll have to postpone kayaking, James sadly informed her. She shrugged. I don't know, maybe there's a river of liquid books or something we can use. It's not ruled out yet. Dave! James caught his friend in passing as they crossed paths at the door to the lair. How've you been? What? Oh. James snapped his head up from his phone. Oh, I'm good, actually. Busy, though, I guess. I've been helping with the new paper dragons. They're kind of silly while they're growing up. And, I guess that's mostly it. Hey, that sounds like enough, honestly, James chuckled. I got tackled by one of them the other day. They're almost big enough that the basement is going to get too small for them in a couple months. Yeah, I feel bad about that, Dave nodded. We're going to have to be careful in the future, 'cause, you know, since we know they can grow at roughly the same speed, we can sort of time it so they're ready to migrate when it's summer outside, not raining too much. He shrugged. That way we have some leeway on when they get their feathers laminated, so they're more waterproof. Oh man, I didn't even think about that, James replied with a wide-eyed look. But, like, we can work around that, right? Make a few big barns for them so they have some shelter that's big enough. We've got that plot of land out in Yamhill? Yakima? One of the Y places that's near here. Yamhill, I think. Also, wait, hang on. Is Pendragon waterproof? She must be, right? Yeah, Pendragon's mostly aircraft aluminum right now, Dave said. Which was technically an answer. But I don't think that's part of her natural life cycle. Not that I guess anyone knows what that is for these guys. Maybe they could just stop growing at roughly dog size. He shrugged. I don't know. I think they might all grow up different. It's a learning experience. James nodded along. We get a lot of those around here, huh? Yeah, it's really exhausting, Dave confirmed. Oh, also, Karen is somewhere around here and wanted to talk to you about securing the lease on the building that Officium Mundi is in. She doesn't need my permission to do that, James said flatly. It had been an uphill battle, but James had been trying to remove himself from a command position. Not that he was trying to abdicate his responsibility to be a leader, he'd given up on that, but he didn't want people going through him for the final say on decisions. The Order was, as he was intentionally pushing it to be, in a weird relationship with the nature of power. It was something that was hard to codify, but what they all actively wanted was a situation where people solved problems on their own initiative and could have an easy time calling for support when they needed it from each other. An organizational structure where no one was actually at the top. Oh, there were people who were leaders, especially of the individual divisions they had formed. But while there were certain set powers vested in those who had been voted into their roles, like veto power due to the safety, or abject lack of safety, of a research experiment, or the final call on response deployments, at the end of the day, it was a much more fluid power structure than anywhere else James knew of. It was also founded on trust. Not just personal trust, but collective, group trust, in the structure of the Order pushing people to do their best, and everyone being on hand to curb any attempted abuses. It wasn't perfect, but it was working. Their form of direct representational democracy might not scale well into their own future, but at the moment, it let them respond to new problems rapidly while still letting everyone's voices be heard. James looked forward to seeing how problems evolved from this as time went by, especially as they expanded. But for now, he needed to establish that he was not in charge, even if people were welcome to take his advice and follow his lead. Yeah, she knows she doesn't, Dave said, bringing James back to the present. She already did it, I think. It's actually kind of wild that we're rich, by the way, but she had some questions for you and anyone in research or ritual about how the dungeon might change if the building is under our control and not being used as an actual office. Because, you know, the dungeon is an office. That's a good point, James hummed softly. Maybe we just sublet it? No, wait, that's horrible. Actually, this is weird. Can we talk about this later? I mean, talk to Karen about it. I'm busy with other stuff. Oh, also, Kika wanted to talk to you, but he's afraid to say that, so I'm telling you. Dave nodded with a very self-satisfied look on his face for remembering to share that interpersonal detail. Thanks, Dave, James said, a minimal amount of sarcasm in his voice. Then he sighed and tried that again. Actually, no, really, thanks. I need to be better about a lot of this kind of stuff. Do you know where Kika is? Dave shook his head. Nah, he vanishes when no one's looking. In the building, probably, he offered, unhelpfully. Anyway, I need to get going. I gotta pick up my mom from a doctor's appointment. He jingled his car keys. James almost asked why he didn't just teleport, but refrained, instead stepping back and motioning to the door with an elegant bow. All right, I'll talk to you later. Oh, you want to come to the library with us tonight? Nah, like I said, I'm busy. I don't have time for a new book. He gave James a short shrug and pushed his way out the front door. No, Dave, Damn it, he's gone. James sighed. I mean, I feel like he knew what I meant, but... He turned and looked around for anyone who was nearby. Do you think he knew what I meant? James asked anyone within 20 feet of himself. No one gave him a good answer. With a deep sigh, James just solved the problem with a text message, like he was apt to do, and headed into the building to find the stealthiest rat roach in the world before he had to leave to explore an extra-dimensional library. Then, after thinking about that sentence, he rescinded the sigh on the grounds that his day was going great and his life had become kind of fantastic.